Game of Thrones Season 6, Episode 3, Oathbreaker. Jon Snow is the Oathbreaker. And who called it? Your old pal right here. Last July, can we roll the clip? Melisandre, the Red Woman, there's no reason for her to be there except to bring Jon back. And if he comes back, his vow to the Night's Watch is only valid until death. So if he died and now he's back, then his watch is ended. It's weird because I don't actually film a lot of videos in cars. It just so happens that that clip I was in a car and now I'm also in a car. I had to do some banking and I'm going to grab a coffee. Is that cool? So it was a great character moment with Sam and Gilly, and they're on this ship in the narrow sea somewhere, and he's going to Old Town to become a maester, and Gilly's saying, you know, wherever you go, I go, and he's basically saying that women are not allowed in the Citadel. I don't think we've seen the Citadel yet, or Old Town. If we have, leave me a comment, correct me. But what does this add up to? So Sam is going to go become a maester. What does it matter? Like, is it gonna, I mean, is this going to be very important? I'm just wondering why we're spending time with these characters. I like Sam. I like Gilly, I suppose, but there's just so much else going on that's like super interesting that I don't really care that much about them. And I'm just wondering what the end game is. So he becomes a maester at Castle Black, and so what? Is he going to help kill the White Walkers? I don't know. Moving on to Bravos, the free city of Bravos. If a girl says her name, I'll give her back her eyes. And Arya keeps saying, you know, a girl is no one. And the waif is beating the crap out of her, but slowly Arya somehow learns to master her awesome bow hunting skills and beat the waif blind, which is super cool, pisses the waif off a little bit, and Jaqen gives her back her sight. Okay. Kind of like with Sam and Gilly, what does this add up to? Does this, I mean, I just can't see how Arya being no one... I just can't see how Arya being no one, being, you know, a faceless man, one of the many, you know, one of the disciples of the many-faced God, is going to factor into the larger story, which is who sits on the Iron Throne, and, you know, what do we do about the White Walkers? I mean, those are kind of the two main plots, so I don't understand really how it's going to factor in. Obviously, she's going to be a factor in a big way. I mean, Arya is too important of a character. I just want to see how she ties back into the main story. Let's touch base with Winterfell real quick and the Boltons, or I guess just Ramsay now. So he has House Umber that wants to join forces with him, and Ramsay's saying, bend the knee to the, you know, your Warden of the North. And the Lord of House Umber is basically saying, no, your father bent the knee to Robb Stark, and how'd that work out for Robb Stark? You know, oaths don't mean anything. So let's just work together. Let's beat the White Walkers. Let's beat Jon Snow and his wildling army. I think it's very pragmatic of Lord Umber to say, you know, in this new world, I mean, look at it last week, and he doesn't know this specifically, but we as the audience do. Last week we lost Balon Greyjoy and Roose Bolton and Dr. Bashir there in Dorne. So, you know, the old guard and their ways and the old kind of, you know, rules, they're not going to help beat the White Walkers. And from, you know, the perspective of the people in Winterfell, it's not going to help beat Jon Snow and his wildling army, as far as they know. So obviously we know a lot more about that situation, especially after this week. But and then he brings him a gift to kind of say, you know, rather than bend a knee, I bring you a gift. And there's Osha and Rickon, who we haven't seen in a couple of years. And just like last week I said, you know, we need the dragons on the board. Having them out of play doesn't do the story any service. Having Rickon out of play doesn't do the story any service. I wish they brought him back a little bit more triumphantly rather than just, you know, sitting there slack-jawed and the head of his poor direwolf Shaggy Dog. I feel like the car thing is a little weird. Can we go sit down somewhere a little bit more comfortable? So let's talk about Bran. The Three-Eyed Raven says he must learn everything before he can go out into the world. And same as with Arya, I'm wondering, you know, how is he going to fit into the larger story? What is Bran going to be able to do with these powers that's going to turn the tide of, you know, fortunes in Westeros? I can obviously see a, you know, myriad possibilities for it. I'm just wondering which one George R.R. Martin has laid out for the writers. Seeing young Ned Stark fighting the Targaryens at the Tower of Joy at the end of Robert's Rebellion was great. It's another great flashback. And I just wonder, is that Neil Patrick Harris?
playing young Ned Stark? It looked a little bit like him. I know it's not. But also, was Ned wielding ice? It didn't look like ice to me, and I'm wondering what the history of that Valyrian steel sword was. Why didn't he have it during Robert's Rebellion? It is pretty interesting, and you know that Ned wasn't there at the Battle of the Trident, so you wondered what he was doing when he's calling out to his father, and his father seems to actually hear him. And the Three-Eyed Raven says maybe he heard the wind. No, we know he heard Bran, so can Bran actually affect the past? Back over to King's Landing, Cersei trying to force her way onto the small council really showed how disliked she and Jaime are. She's not feared anymore, after her walk of shame. Grandmaster Pycelle just bad-mouthing Cersei in the mountain. I'm pretty sure the mountain has killed people for less. So it was quite a bit of restraint there for the mountain. The mention of Dorne, I mean, these are real issues at play here, and the small council is just not interested. They are letting, emotions and grudges get the better of them, especially Kevin Lannister. The scene with Tommen and the High Sparrow, we think that finally Tommen is going to go confront these religious zealots. He's going to go get his wife back, and he's going to get revenge for what they did to his mother, but instead he gets sweet-talked by the High Sparrow. Very interesting to have on Mother's Day this talk of mothers and their importance and, mother's mercy and all of that. I did appreciate the synergy there. But Tommen, man up. Go kick the door down. When the High Sparrow says, as they work through your mother, there's so much good in all of us, and the best thing we can do is to bring it out. The issue for me is that Westeros to this point has not been a place where religious high-mindedness wins the day. Master Quibburn's little birds, I liked that they touched on the vacuum that Varys left in King's Landing. They only have to bring him little whispers. I did enjoy that. Speaking of Varys, let's go to Meereen, and he is playing the game quite well. He's getting intel that is troubling, to say the least. The Sons of the Harpy are being funded by the former slave masters in Astapor and Yunkai and wherever else. I don't really care. But they have a larger problem than they thought they had. And Tyrion and Varys are the only two, I think, that can solve this for Dany, because she is too naive to solve this on her own. Dany needs to get to Westeros, and I feel like this whole thing with her going to Vaes Dothrak is just another stall tactic. It's another delay. It's not moving that story forward, other than maybe the character development that she's going to learn how to rule. Maybe she'll learn something from these women in Vaes Dothrak, these older widows. And it is interesting to me that her accomplishments as a woman are nothing to these people. Just she was Drogo's wife, and that is the beginning and the end of it for them. The breaker of chains, the mother of dragons. It doesn't matter. She's Drogo's widow, and so she's gonna either be executed, obviously not, but they're gonna try, or she's gonna have to sit in the temple until she grows old. With Tyrion and Varys by her side, she's definitely gonna start getting some more shrewd advice and learn how to play the game herself, because she's obviously the front runner to take the Iron Throne. And when she does eventually come to Westeros, it's going to be very interesting to see what she does. But if she has Tyrion and Varys with her, she'll be much more formidable than she would have been just with her naivete and her bluster. Speaking of Tyrion, great scene with him with Grey Worm and Missandei. I don't really know how to say her name. I just want to say Melisandre, but that's obviously not her. Great scene with them, and the master of conversation, the master of drinking with two people who want nothing to do with either one of those two things. It was great seeing him kind of try to find a common ground and, in the end fail. It was just more great acting by Peter Dinklage.
A wise man once said, "A true history of the world is a history of great conversations held in elegant rooms."
So let's get to Jon Snow and the Wall. That's obviously the heart of this episode. He's back, and they think he's some kind of a god. And the part that disappointed me was I was hoping he was going to come back full of vengeance and full of spirit and just start laying waste to his enemies. But instead he sits there kind of slack-jawed and confused, and he doesn't know what he wants to do. And he gives his friend the cloak, and he decides he's going to walk away from the Night's Watch. He doesn't want to be Lord Commander anymore. Obviously his watch has ended, and he's moving on to the next thing. But I would have liked to see him rally the forces of the Night's Watch and the Wildlings and at least take back Winterfell. Save Rickon, and we know Sansa's about to knock on the door, so we can actually have 3 of the Stark children together again. But I feel that, unfortunately, Sansa's just going to miss Jon, just like Jon missed Bran those years back, and just like Arya missed Sansa. And I'm wondering when the writers will actually put 2 of these characters in the same room together again, because it seems to me that Jon's leaving just as Sansa's arriving, which is just heartbreaking. But Jon does execute Alistair Thorne, and the actor who plays Alistair Thorne had a really great quote from Macbeth, where he says, nothing in his life became him like the leaving did. And that really speaks to my view of Alistair Thorne, where he went out with his convictions, he said, look, you beat me, I was wrong, but I stood up for what I believed in. And he's basically telling Jon that now he's cursed. He's going to have to fight forever. They're going to keep bringing him back and making him fight. And, you know, his wars yet to come will never be over. The advice that Sir Davos Seaworth gives to Jon, he says, you know, you were dead and now you're not. It's completely fucking mad. And he tells him, you know, you have to go out and fight. You have to just keep cleaning up as much of the shit as you can. And unfortunately, at the end, we see Jon just walk away. And his motivations, to me, what he's going to do next is a complete mystery. I can't even guess where he's going to go or what he's going to do. And I can only hope he runs into Sansa and hears what's happened in Winterfell and decides to actually do something about it. Stannis was not the prince who was promised, but somebody has to be. So we will see next week if that is Jon Snow or not. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. We'll see you next time.